All right, hello and welcome to session number 3 in day number 5 of our clinical summit week. So we are coming to an end here, which actually saddens me. I'm having a ton of fun. I love engaging with the speakers, and my gosh, what a great morning so far, right? We had Dr. Matt, and then followed by Dr. Gonshore, who Dr. Gonshore is just bringing the heat. He was in it today. That guy is 79 years old. Just so you guys know, I think he's 79 now. I know he's at least 78, but he is between 78 79 years old, and I pray to have even half that amount of energy and verbal fluency at that point. He is such a smart, such a sharp guy, and we just really love what he's doing. He also, too, I didn't want to say this live because I don't want to hype him up too much. He's a humble guy and he would probably be uncomfortable with it, but that guy, I'll word it this way, could have stopped working many years ago. He is truly working now because he loves it, and what a cool thing to have him in our circle. So we have another amazing presentation and presenter for you. Just a few housekeeping things before we get to him here. If you guys want to enter for our final drawing for the $1,000 advanced course giveaway that is today at 4:00 Eastern, take a picture of Clinical Summit Week, post it to your Instagram or Facebook stories. Only the stories work. If you have entered throughout any point this week, you are automatically in it. So we appreciate another shout out, but it's not going to give you double entries or anything like that. You don't have to do this again if you were already in the drawings earlier this week. But if you have never entered, now is the time. By 3:00 Eastern, there is no more opportunities to do it. And then we will get you guys that additional $1,000 advanced course, which is going to be amazing. Cool. Who's excited to learn about hypothyroidism? Please let me know in the chat. I would love to know. 4:00 Eastern today, when we give away the $1,000 advanced course, we will then be going live with the founder of FDN. He's actually going to be doing a presentation, a small one, 15 to 20 minutes, around our MRT food sensitivity test and our metabolic typing diet that FDN teaches. So if you've been watching those 5 and 5 sessions at the end of each day, they've been pre-recorded, but Reed's going to do it live and just do a mini version, and then we're jumping right into Q&A. So any questions that you have about the course, if you want to do this, if you have decided I want to be like some of our speakers when I grow up, now is the time, and we can get you into FDN, and the sale for it is good until the end of the day on May 19th. And speaking of amazing FDN practitioners, I happen to have one right here. Ryan Monahan, how the heck are you, my friend?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
Anyone know Ryan Monahan already in the chat? Let me know. Ryan and I announced this publicly the other day. This is no secret. So he has an amazing business of his own and a few things that he offers, which he'll touch on later today. But we started something together with my mom called the Autoimmune Recovery Lab. So I'm just so privileged to not only have known this guy for 6-7 years as a friend, but to take this to the next level and get to combine the best of the clinical minds with some of the business minds. And we're just super excited to help out other people. So today, though, he's going to be talking about one of his favorite things, which is hypothyroidism and probably Hashimoto's as well, I'm assuming, right?
It's going to be a bit more focused on the hypothyroidism component today.
All right.
Yeah.
And we got to shout this out. Can you just tell us, how long did you spend on this presentation? Because you were telling me, and I think this deserves to be said to others.
I think I outdid myself again. I've got, I think, 42 slides. And I probably put 12 to 14 hours, maybe 15, maybe 15 or 16 hours into it.
And keep in mind, this is a guy who does presentations on similar topics all the time. So he could have just pulled from that. So to add 15 hours to it is pretty amazing. And just so you know, you already have some fans here. Ali said, Ryan is the best. Michael said, love Ryan. He helped me a ton. That's amazing. I got a shameless plug this here. If you guys are interested in the clinical side, please stay until the end of Ryan's thing, because he's about to share something I don't know that he's ever really shared publicly in a setting like this before. So that's going to be super cool. Ryan, I know that we were talking in the private chat. We have Courtney Cowie after this, who is a clinical advisor here at FDN. We can't do a full 90 minutes, but let's say we'll give a 5 to 10 minute buffer. I'm going to message Courtney, just let her know that's what's going on. And I think she's going to be totally cool with that. So take your time, and if you need a full hour, that's all good. All right. I have your slides up, my friend, and you are officially good to go.
Beautiful. Awesome. Give me 1 second here, guys. I'm going to actually be recording on my phone as we're going live here. So ready to go now. So glad to be here, guys. I am incredibly excited about this. This is a brand new presentation, like Evan alluded to. I've been working really hard on this all week, and yeah, this is brand new content that I have not shared to a practitioner audience before, or really even to a client audience. So please do stick around to the end. As Evan mentioned, I've got a really exciting brand new offer that I've been working on. I'm excited to share with you guys for all of the aspiring health coaches out there and the FDNs that are graduates in the house. So I know this is intended to be about an hour long, so I'm going to move a little bit more quickly. Just a quick introduction here. I've been an FDN practitioner for almost 10 years now. In about 6 months, it'll be a 10-year run as an FDN. So I've been doing it full time since then. I go by the Mindful Nutrivore. Evan mentioned that him and I started a project together called Autoimmune Recovery Lab. I also teach organic acids. I have a course under the Holistic Health Experts umbrella where I teach organic acids. If anyone was interested in that course, I'm happy to share that information with you. And this Functional Fast Track is a brand new offering. So you can see I have my hands on a lot of things here. I like to keep busy, including doing these presentations for y'all. So some of you have heard this, but because I'm assuming there's a lot of new people in the audience and aspiring FDN practitioners, just a quick rundown of my own personal story and journey here. The first image on the left was taken in May of 2012. That was the actual day that picture was taken that I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. I should say severe hypothyroidism. I'll show you some interesting numbers as we go along. Prior to that day of 2012, I had been to over 40 doctors over a 10-year period. No doctor had ever run a thyroid panel on me, not even a very basic TSH or T4. I had never had a doctor even suggest running a thyroid panel, even though at that time I was struggling with debilitating chronic fatigue, brain fog, depression, ear, nose, and throat complications, allergies, asthma. It's pretty much a laundry list of symptoms that I was dealing with. I'm very incredibly grateful that I finally did get that diagnosis that ultimately led me towards becoming far more interested in understanding functional health and wellness and all aspects of our biology and physiology. So after I realized that was more than just sort of a hobby or a mild passion, that's when I decided to take it to the next level. I enrolled in the FDN program in 2015. I graduated in January of 2016. And then this picture in 2017 was roughly about a year after implementing all of the tools that I learned in FDN. Then over here to the right, you could see this picture was taken last summer. I've made this joke before, but I'll say it again. I think I actually look younger in that picture, aside from having a lot more gray hair. I've been diligently tracking my thyroid antibodies since 2012 at an average clip of about 3 times per year. And I've included here just a simple bar graph to show you guys that I've tracked my antibodies and have been able to put them into remission range over that long period of time, right? And it was a lot of hard work, right? I'm not going to pretend like this was easy. It was a lot of hard work and discipline, changing my mindset, my diet, my lifestyle, healing the gut, detoxification, eating a nutrient-dense diet. That could be a whole nother presentation, actually, all of the things I did to put my thyroid condition into remission. But that's very, very much largely thanks to FDN. I would have never been able to do this without FDN. I should also mention that the first endocrinologist I went to told me that tracking my thyroid antibodies would be a waste of time and that there was no reason to run them. And even if I did track them, there was no way that I could get them down. So this was partially a promise to myself to prove him wrong, essentially, to be able to show that this was possible and to use everything I've learned over the years to help other people do the same. Love this quote here from Gabor Mate from The Myth of Normal. If we could see illness itself not as a cruel twist of fate, but rather as an expected and therefore normal consequence of abnormal or unnatural circumstances, it would have revolutionary implications for how we approach everything health related. So In a sense, what he's saying there is just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal, right? And I would put every chronic illness or condition underneath the umbrella of that definition, right? That we've come to understand chronic illness as being normal, when we actually sort of should expect that in a world that's not conducive to facilitating health, with processed foods and staring at computer screens all day and being cut off from community, living sedentary lifestyles. I could list a million examples, right, of how our diet and lifestyle in the modern age is not conducive to facilitating healing. And this is really the heart or the crux of the FDN process. The FDNs in the house should be very familiar with this concept, but for those of you who are new to this idea here, what we're seeing here is that symptoms are the last thing to occur in the disease process. Disease being the opposite of ease, right? So all the way to the right, we have our symptoms or our condition or even our autoimmune condition like Hashimoto's or lupus, whatever it might be. And all the way over here, far removed from the symptom, we have the root cause, or better stated, root causes, right? Because in reality, there's never just one hidden stressor in the body. It's more like a multitude of combined root stressors that create this metabolic chaos in the body. So we start with these root causes, and it has a ripple effect to contributing to cellular damage, tissue damage, organ system dysfunction. And then eventually the symptoms pop up maybe years later after these root causes have been bubbling up underneath the surface for months, years, maybe decades. Yet our conventional medical model is really designed to focus on treating or suppressing the symptoms. You can imagine if that's our primary focus, and we could see how far removed the root cause is from the symptoms, that we're eventually just going to be ending up with more symptoms. They're just going to pop up somewhere else. We're playing this game of whack-a-mole with our symptoms, okay? This is not to discredit the need or utility for conventional medicine, okay? There are times when that's needed or times when it could be life-saving, right? But I would say most of us as FDNs in the FDN community believe that as far as everyday chronic symptoms go, brain fog, headaches, fatigue, weight gain, allergies, digestive complaints, that this sort of functional model that we're looking at here is really where it's at, right? And so there's this gap, there's this disconnect between the conventional world and the functional world, but each serving their own unique purpose. All right, setting the stage here, I'm actually kind of starting with some of the key points first, just to plant these ideas in your mind. So first, we're going to start with the idea that TSH, aka thyroid stimulating hormone, that marker alone is not enough to assess thyroid health. Right? Furthermore, thyroid dysfunction is a whole body condition. So we could actually say that thyroid dysfunction has almost nothing to do with the thyroid itself, right? And everything to do with everything else going on in the body. So when we're looking at things from a holistic perspective, we're always wanting to think about how everything is interconnected. Last time I checked, we're one body. We're not just a bunch of separate parts and pieces. So understanding thyroid patterns, and that's really the main purpose of this talk today, is to reveal these patterns and sort of the secret language of the thyroid, can provide us clues as to what the body is trying to tell you. Lastly, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to healing the thyroid. I've been doing this for almost 10 years. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of clients. The number's probably over 1,000 now, to be quite honest. And I can say that no one client, or no two clients rather, are ever the same. So that keeps me on my toes because everyone's needs are going to be completely different. So why all of this obsession around the thyroid? Why do I find this to be such an important topic? Let's talk about that here for a minute. It's deserving of some attention. So according to the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, NHANES data, from 2009 to 2012, approximately 10% of the US population had hypothyroidism, which would have been about 30 million Americans at that time. About 1/3 of that number is estimated to be diagnosed with Hashimoto's, so about 10 million Americans, including my lucky self here. But I actually believe that that number is probably much, much higher. I think there are millions of people that have never had their antibodies tested and they do not know that they have an autoimmune condition. So also, in terms of why I think the thyroid is so important, the thyroid is the master endocrine gland. It is often referred to as the thermostat for the body. That's why when your thyroid slows down, you often feel cold all the time. One of the symptoms that I had when I was living in the Athens, Atlanta area in Georgia, I was freezing cold all the time for almost a decade. I would be wearing a sweater in 80, 90-degree weather, and people thought I was crazy. And even with a sweater on, I would still be shivering. You're going to see why that I felt that way here. I think it's the next slide, or one coming up shortly. All right, this is a major, major takeaway for why I think the thyroid is so important. We have thyroid receptors for our primary bioactive thyroid hormone, which is T3, triiodothyronine, on nearly every single cell of the body. The only cells in the body that don't have receptors to take in thyroid hormone would be red blood cells. All right. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the only other thing that could be said for is vitamin D. So you have to think from this sort of evolutionary perspective. Why is it that every cell in the body is prioritizing thyroid hormone? Why don't we have universal receptors for other hormones or nutrients? Okay. So we have receptors for thyroid hormone in nearly every single cell of the body, and therefore no tissue in the body is exempt from the influence of thyroid hormone. We can see over here that the thyroid influences or helps to maintain homeostasis within brain development, body weight, bone health, and muscle contractions, the menstrual cycle, breathing, heart rate, and so on and so forth. So here's a huge clinical takeaway from my experience, is that it is extremely challenging to nearly impossible to normalize metabolic function until the thyroid has been resolved or fixed. You are likely to get nowhere until you fix a hypothyroid issue, especially if it's more severe, right? I have a lot of clients that come to me, they say they want to heal the thyroid naturally. Then we get into, okay, well, what does that mean? You know, the word naturally, that's a whole nother conversation. But what I often tell them is, if you're being thrown off the side of a boat, right, you're going to be one of the first people to raise their hand for a life raft, right? Instead of flailing your arms around trying to swim to the shore. And that's how I view thyroid medication or thyroid hormone. I'm not against it at all, even if it's short term to get you onto the shore. And then you could figure out after the fact, okay, why was my boat drowning? Or maybe I can talk with my doctor about how to potentially wean off of the thyroid hormone, right? But I just want to make that clear, right? I'm not anti-thyroid medication. There's no one size fits all approach there. There's a lot of different approaches to doing that, including even over-the-counter glandular products like bovine-derived glandulars. Those are tools that I will use occasionally, right, depending on the situation. But again, that being said, if you're trying to just sort of wait and see, in my opinion, it's going to take you a lot longer to get there. Thyroid medication saved my life. The first day that I took it, I was literally a different person the next day. I woke up for the first time in 10 years without an alarm when the sun came up. I couldn't believe it. I was expecting it to take at least a month. It was an overnight change. All right, so how do you know if you might be dealing with hypothyroidism? So simply put, when your thyroid slows down, everything slows down. Your thyroid is the thermostat. It's the master regulator. So this is a typical profile of someone with hypothyroidism. They might be dealing with fatigue. That's one of the most common complaints. brain fog, depression, dry skin, low libido, cold intolerance, high cholesterol, especially high LDL. Thyroid hormone actually regulates cholesterol clearance from the liver. So if you can't clear it from the liver, your LDL builds up, your ApoB could build up. That puts you at higher risk for atherosclerosis and cardiovascular disease. It's not good. Weight gain, very common with thyroid issues, constipation, low blood pressure. So if you're watching this and you're like, whoa, that's me, or at least even 3 of these, it might be time to run a full thyroid panel. And I'll share with you guys what that would look like shortly. So hypothyroidism versus Hashimoto's, right? These are often discussed as though they're 2 separate things, when in fact, in most cases, they're the same thing. So firstly, hypothyroidism is not a thyroid medication deficiency, right? It's a sign from your body that something deeper is going wrong, even though, like we just discussed, I'm not opposed to thyroid medication when it's needed to get you feeling normal again. So in the US, up to as much as 95% of hypothyroidism cases are caused by Hashimoto's, this autoimmune component, this phenomenon where the immune system is mistakenly attacking your thyroid and causing destruction and inflammation to the thyroid. So the thyroid's taking a hit, and that compromises its ability to make thyroid hormone, right? So in most cases, these 2 are one and the same. I've had dozens of clients come to me over the years that they have hypothyroidism, they're taking Levo or Synthroid or Armor, whatever it might be, and they've never tested their antibodies. And then we end up doing that together, and I'm able to help that person find out for the first time they have this Hashimoto's condition. And it is my strongly held belief that if you could slow down that attack on the thyroid and slow down the damage, the tissue can recover and your thyroid can start making its own thyroid hormone again. Sometimes that can happen very quickly. Sometimes that can take years, depending on maybe how long your thyroid has been attacked, right? Where in my case, it took me almost 10 years to get diagnosed, and my thyroid antibodies were extremely high. You saw it in that chart from earlier. So the conventional approach, medically speaking, is to only run TSH. We're going to talk a lot about why that's a problem. And then also, by the time hypothyroidism has finally been diagnosed, on average, it takes 5 to 7 years for the average person. Up to 90% of the thyroid has already been damaged or compromised. So in my view, this actually calls for earlier detection and prevention. We need to be testing for this, ideally routinely, not just with women, with men too. But again, I'm one of the lucky men. Even though there's about a 7-to-1 ratio for Hashimoto's of women to men, I just got very lucky. If I didn't get that diagnosis, I wouldn't be here with you guys today. So TSH presents a very incomplete picture. TSH alone is not enough to assess thyroid health, not even close. TSH is technically not even a thyroid marker, which is kind of baffling. It's a pituitary marker. It's produced by your pituitary gland. Now, the reasoning here of why TSH is run is that it does respond to imbalanced thyroid hormone levels, but it's not a direct measure of thyroid output. It's an indirect measurement. So ideally, although it often does not work out this way, high TSH is a response to low thyroid hormone, where low TSH is a response to high thyroid hormone. But checking TSH just by itself doesn't tell you much. It's sort of like just looking at the number on a thermostat, but you're not actually checking to see if heat is blowing out of the vents of your house. It's like you see a number on the screen, but the heater or the furnace isn't actually burning hot, right? That can actually happen, right? Where for some reason your thermostat gets kind of disconnected from your whole HVAC or forced heating system. This was my very first thyroid panel. My TSH was above 150. It's kind of small here, but you could see the expected range from the lab was 0.4 to 4.5, which means I was at least 30 times above the acceptable range, or more like 60 times above the range if you're using a tighter, more optimal range, which we'll look at shortly here. We're going to look at all the ideal ranges. So that is pretty extreme. The only person I know who has me beat was actually a client of Evan's. I think her TSH was 211. I know it was somewhere above 200. Now, you could see it says greater than 150, so the number could have been higher than that. The doctor at the time actually told me that it tops out at 150 with the lab that he was running it through. So that very much explained how I was feeling at the time. Remember, TSH is an inverse marker. The higher the TSH, typically, the more you're in a hypothyroid state. Excuse me. And I very much felt for a good part of a decade like I was in kind of a metabolic coma. I felt like a depressed sloth with no will, no motivation. I couldn't work full time because I was so fatigued, and I was laying in bed half the day, literally. I mean, I would sleep 12 to 14 hours a day and sometimes lay in bed for the remainder of the day. It was not fun. I don't recommend it. Not that it's a choice. So looking at the thyroid panel basics here, I have a dream thyroid panel, I called it, over to the right. So I have an image of an engine here, and I've always said that T3 is like the accelerator pedal for your body's entire metabolism. So I wanted to see if I could extend that analogy for a whole entire thyroid panel, and actually it came together pretty quickly. So hopefully you guys get a kick out of this, and I think it makes it easier to remember some of these markers. So again, TSH is just the signal. It's the pituitary signal. It's like the driver saying, let's go, to start the engine, right? If that TSH is high, it's trying to stimulate your thyroid. Free T4, that's the primary hormone produced by the thyroid gland. Your thyroid does not make very much T3. So 80 to 90% of the hormone produced by your thyroid is T4, okay? And this is sort of like the fuel tank. So it's the energy in reserve, but it's not actually active until it gets converted into T3. We'll talk about how that happens. But this is really the accelerator for the whole entire metabolism. It's the bioactive form of the thyroid hormone. And once again, like I said earlier, it's received by nearly every single cell in the body, except for your red blood cells. So for all intents and purposes, having low free T3 is actually more problematic than having low. Both can be a problem, but if I could only run one thyroid marker, if I, for some reason, had to make a choice, it would be T3, the free T3. Reverse T3 is the brake pedal. It's the opposite of free T3. It can actually block or inhibit that free T3 at the cellular level. So that prevents acceleration when the system is stressed, or maybe when T3 is too high, like say you're over medicating with T3, then your body can increase its production of reverse T3, I meant to say, as a means of putting on the brakes so you don't end up in a hyperthyroid state, like feeling anxious and having heart palpitations, for example. And then the antibodies like TPO and thyroglobulin, these would be the system's check engine light. That's where it's telling you, all right, your immune system is attacking the engine. Typically, that's going to be rooted in gut infections, intestinal permeability, and toxin exposure, to name a few, right? I did a whole other presentation just on Hashimoto's. Today, I'm focusing more on the hypothyroid component, but I don't know if Evan or Amaris or Stephen or someone might be able to find that and drop that in the chat box for someone who might be interested in doing a deep dive on learning more about Hashimoto's and autoimmunity and how autoimmunity arises in the body. You all are welcome to take a screenshot of any of these slides here. These are the actual optimal ranges for thyroid function. These are the ranges I use in my practice. These are not the same as the ranges you'll get back from LabCorp or Quest or from your doctor. These ranges are more narrow, and we're looking for proactive. We're looking to achieve optimal function and therefore be proactive before your thyroid values become so out of range that you feel horrible. Right. So these are, before moving along, the 5 thyroid markers that I run on every single client I work with. This is non-negotiable for me. This is what's going to give you the most complete picture. All right, this is pretty interesting, getting a little bit deeper into thyroid dynamics. So we're looking at free T3 versus reverse T3. And they're the go and the stop, like I mentioned on the previous slide. T3 is the accelerator, reverse T3 is the brake. What's interesting is that these both come from T4. The T4 is, we might call it the parent hormone for both T3 and reverse T3. So your body at any given time is always making choices or a decision between whether it will convert into the gas pedal or the brake pedal. So if we're wanting to promote good conversion of T4 to T3, we're looking at a lot of these nutrients here, potentially iodine in some cases, selenium for sure. Selenium is probably the most non-negotiable for that conversion. Iron, zinc, vitamin A, and then a handful of B vitamins. Where the body will increase reverse T3, this brake pedal, when there's too much stress. If someone is supplementing or being medicated with too much T4, again, the body can convert that excess into T3 to slow things down. Vitamin D deficiency, which I can tell you is 80 to 90% of my clients, because people are not getting it out in the sun. High estrogen or estrogen dominance, elevated antibodies that can actually contribute to slowing down the thyroid. And believe it or not, this is a new one. I've shown this slide before, but this is something I've been digging into more recently, which is fasting or caloric restriction can actually have a major effect on not only increasing the brake, the reverse T3, but decreasing T3. And the body does this as a sort of compensatory mechanism. It's, in times of feast or famine, when it thinks that you're famished or you're deprived of nutrients or you're not putting enough calories into the system, it's going to slow down your metabolism, right? It wants to slow down the rate at which you're burning through calories and you're using up your macronutrients, your fats, your proteins, your carbohydrates. So I just mentioned that to say that fasting is very much an individualized decision. But if I see someone who's fasting and they have high reverse T3, I do not think it's going to be a good idea for them until maybe they can build in some more metabolic flexibility. Now, some people might say, well, okay, but our hunter-gatherer ancestors would fast for days, right? And we did that for hundreds of thousands of years. But we're not our hunter-gatherers, right? Most of us are dealing with extraordinary amounts of stress, in addition to poor nutrition, toxin exposure, gut issues, cortisol dysregulation. So there's the question of, like, can we really compare the modern diet and lifestyle to our hunter-gatherers? I think their systems maybe were more suited on average to being able to handle that fasting when they weren't dealing with all of the modern day stressors of the 21st century. Okay, so the next chapter here, the epic failure of only running TSH. TSH is an unreliable marker of how the rest of the body is responding to thyroid hormone. So I want to talk a little bit about why TSH alone is not adequate for assessing thyroid function. So firstly, TSH is a lagging indicator. You can have low thyroid hormone long before TSH rises and tells you that there's a problem. I have lost count of how many times I've seen this, where TSH was normal on a lab, only to find low free T4 and or low free T3 on a full panel. Why does this happen? Well, chronic stress might actually be suppressing TSH, where the thyroid hormone might be low, but the TSH should, quote unquote, be higher, but cortisol is actually blunting it. So that's a combination issue of this low thyroid hormone and suppressed TSH at the same time. So TSH is not going to be able to show you what's going on. Nutrient deficiencies and or liver dysfunction can impair conversion of T4 to T3. Those nutrients would include, among others, selenium, zinc, and iron. So this is a case where TSH just maybe hasn't caught up yet. Or it may be the case that TSH levels were never normal to begin with. You weren't looking at the optimal range. So your doctor saw that your TSH was at a 3.5 or a 4. That's technically still normal on a standard lab, but in reality, from an optimal perspective, and from what I've seen in my practice, most people will feel symptoms above 2 or 2.5. Normal versus optimal. So again, most labs use wide ranges for TSH, about 0.5 to 4.5. Joe Cohen here from the website and blog Self-Tact, he says that normal ranges are created using populations that contain a significant number of unhealthy individuals, leading to ranges that don't reflect a healthy population. So do we want to lump ourselves in with that data set of sort of unhealthy people? From Dr. Isabella Wentz here, in my clinical experience treating thousands of clients, I have personally found that most people feel best with a TSH between 0.5 and 2 and are symptomatic with a TSH above 2.5. You'll see this a lot in the functional medicine world, that 0.5 to 2, maybe 0.5 to 2.2, 2.5, somewhere in that kind of range. So case in point, many people don't feel well once TSH climbs above 2, but they often get dismissed because they're still, quote unquote, in range. TSH fluctuations. So this is not talked about hardly ever. TSH levels fluctuate throughout the day alongside the body's natural circadian rhythms. Where free T4 and free T3, they can fluctuate, but far less than TSH fluctuates. Those thyroid hormones are much more stable throughout the course of a day. So, okay, you could maybe run a thyroid hormone in the morning where it tends to peak around 2 to 4 a.m. But let's say you ran it, like most people aren't awake by that time. Let's say they ran it at 8 or 9 a.m. And the next time they run their thyroid panel, they run it much later in the day when TSH is low. They might think that they have hyperthyroidism because they're looking at a low TSH level, right? Or vice versa. So it is important when we're rerunning thyroid panels that we try to get an apples to apples comparison. There's no wrong time of day to test your thyroid, but it's consistency that's key. So we want to try to schedule follow-up tests roughly within a 1 to 2 hour window of the previous draw to get an accurate comparison. But again, imagine you only ran TSH and it looked off simply because of these fluctuations throughout the day. You might be misled to thinking you have a thyroid problem. All right, so TSH can also miss T4 to T3 conversion issues. It can also miss autoimmunity if we're not running those antibodies. So here's the thing. TSH is more sensitive to changes in T4 because it's the primary circulating thyroid hormone, even though it's not bioactive. So as long as T4 is normal, the pituitary may not notice, even when T4 levels are normal. Meanwhile, T3 levels are low because the TSH, the pituitary is only responding to T4, not the T3, which is the good stuff. That's the accelerator pedal. Okay, so this summary of pituitary logic over here on the right, you could have normal T4 but low T3, and the TSH level might still be normal, and that's not good. You're fatigued, you've got weight gain, brain fog, constipation, low libido. TSH looks normal, but whoops, you didn't run a full thyroid panel, and your pituitary gland didn't notice that you had low T3. right? Also, you can have seen this many, many times. You can have rising antibodies years before TSH changes, because you need like accumulated damage to the thyroid before that tends to keep or cause this issue with low thyroid hormone levels and TSH starts to rise. TSH levels also miss cellular receptivity issues. So in other words, your blood levels of thyroid hormone might actually look truly normal, even from an optimal perspective. But what if your cells aren't receiving or taking in the thyroid hormone? So your thyroid is making enough thyroid hormone, you have enough in circulation, but your cells are not taking it in or rejecting it. So you still feel hypothyroid. So thyroid panels actually at large are not able to detect this or take it into account. And this happens in what's known as the cell danger response, which is where chronic stress, trauma, PTSD, toxins, or infections can actually block or inhibit that T3. It's not taking it in. So it's not just about what you have, it's about what you can use. So we'll actually come back and talk about that a lot more. So getting into the actual bulk of it, we're talking about 5 root causes behind hypothyroidism. So we're going to learn the secret language of the thyroid and what these different patterns, now that we understand some of those basic markers, what some of these different patterns might tell us about what's going on in the body. Okay. So just checking in the chat box here. I've been laser focused in on the presentation. So
all good. What's been happening with every presentation is people, they ask questions throughout and just say cool comments or share their stories. That's totally fine though. And we can still do questions at the end.
Sounds good. Feel free to interrupt me if there's, you need a time warning or anything like that. Cool. So before we continue, I just want to get a few things out of the way. As FDN practitioners, we do not diagnose or treat, but rather our goal is to identify the hidden stressors in the body that may be preventing us from experiencing normal or optimal function. So we're trying to move from a state of dysfunction to a state of optimal function, right? Now, many of the patterns I'm going to show you, it's not as though they're siloed per se. They can overlap. So things aren't always so nice and tidy in reality. Technically, you could probably have almost all of the patterns I'm about to show you all at once. So I had mentioned at the beginning, thyroid dysfunction equals whole body dysfunction. That is, we cannot understand the thyroid in isolation. It has to be understood in context of all body systems. So FDNs, we want to think like generalists, not like a specialist. Everything causes everything is kind of my joke when it comes to the functional health approach, right? Because everything is interconnected. So I do want to clarify, I never run thyroid panels, even though that's the talk of the presentation. I never do this without running the full FDN lab work investigation. Never, ever, ever. I would never do that. If someone asked me to do that, I would actually say no. I'm not going to just run a thyroid panel without doing a GI map, without doing an HTMA, without, you get the point. So scope of practice consideration here as FDNPs, unless we are licensed medical professionals, under no circumstances can we advise on a client's medication, their dosage, getting off of a med. We can educate them. We can tell them what we're seeing from a nutritional perspective or a functional perspective, but if they're looking to get off their med, they should discuss that with their doctor. Okay, so pattern number 1 is the autoimmune pattern. This is very likely the pattern that I see the most with my clients, which is why I wanted to start off with it. This is where your immune system is mistaking your thyroid for the enemy. All of these come from real world clients, by the way. This is a client I'm actually currently working with right now. His initial main health challenges were fatigue, headaches, sinus congestion, and heart palpitations. This was the lab pattern here. He has high TSH. That's typically what you would expect with hypothyroidism. Remember, it's inversely related to T4 and T3. So the thyroid hormones are low. So he's not pushing down the accelerator as much as he should be. We have very high TPO antibodies. He did not run reverse T3 when we first started. These were labs from his previous practitioner. So we see slow thyroid, high TSH, and thyroid antibodies. He also did not run the thyroglobulin. So the root cause of this pattern here would be Hashimoto's. It's going to be driven by leaky gut, chronic infections, or gluten sensitivity, or all of the above. It could also be triggered by toxins, mold, viruses, parasites, all the things that we could test for example, on a stool pathogen test. Nutrient depletion could also contribute here. Selenium, vitamin D, glutathione, right? And the thyroid hormone production is slowing down with this particular pattern because of the damage being done via the immune attack from the immune system, that autoimmune process. So this is a classic autoimmune pattern, right? This is the one that I likely see the most. I want to dig a little bit deeper into some of the other lab findings with him as well. But before we do that, I actually have a pretty incredible snapshot of before and after for his labs with a special focus here on the reduction in the TPO antibodies. This was about 3 to 4 months into working together. We got his TPO antibodies down from over 2,000 to down to 239, which if you do the math is an 88% reduction, which is really, really incredible. It took me almost 10 years to do that, right? Because I didn't have all of the knowledge that I do now. Now, this client was not taking any thyroid hormone or prescription. I got the impression, having a number of conversations with him, that he didn't want to do that, which, I had to respect his wishes, even though I thought he could benefit even from like a low dose of maybe a glandular. All right, so how did we do this? By addressing underlying stressors, doing the FDN process, addressing H. pylori, candida, dysbiosis, and there were a couple of heavy metals that showed up on his lab work. He had extremely high levels of uranium. This gentleman lives in Utah. That's actually very common to find uranium in the water supply. So we're putting a lot of attention on this water filtration system in his home. So filtering his drinking water especially. To some degree, this is an HTMA test. This is a hair test. So it's hard to distinguish how much of this is just contaminating the hair through, like when he's taking a shower, versus how much is getting into the body. But either way, he's clearly getting exposed to it. And his copper levels were exceptionally high. Some might refer to that in the HTMA world as copper toxicity. So we've actively been working on a lot of detox, especially with focusing on getting the copper and the uranium down, right? The uranium can be very, very tough on the kidneys, right? It has been associated with blood sugar imbalances. Who knows how it could affect the thyroid? I haven't seen any research on that, but I also wouldn't doubt it. He did have H. pylori, is well established in that autoimmune presentation I did back in the fall. I shared, I think, 4 or 5 different publications establishing this connection between H. pylori and autoimmunity, especially Hashimoto's, right? So we immediately got him on some protocols to get that level down, or even if we can get it eradicated entirely, that'd be great. Now, his H. pylori was not above the reference range, but as FDNs, we don't treat the test paper. We're addressing the health of that person, that individual coming to us with the chronic health complaints. So I look at this and I say, he's got Hashimoto's, he's immune compromised. I don't care what the level is. We're getting that H. pylori out of there. And you could clearly see how that 88% reduction in TPO antibodies, pretty remarkable. He also had candida showing up, an opportunistic yeast. It's often secondary to H. pylori. Sometimes it's secondary to dysbiosis or parasites. It can act as a reservoir for toxins, so it can actually harbor heavy metals within its cell membranes. So what I mean by that is it's very often that when you see candida overgrowth, that is a strong indicator that there are heavy metals accumulating in the system, which we saw on the HTMA. Now, again, although this candida was not above the reference range, stool testing is generally considered to have low sensitivity for picking up fungi and yeast. In other words, it's pretty rare that I see Candida show up on a GI map. So if it's showing up at all, that should be considered to be a major event. He also had high beta-glucuronidase. So that means that a process in the liver known as glucuronidation was being inhibited. So as a result, hormones like estrogen and toxins like mycotoxins from mold can get recirculated back into the body. We call this autointoxication. That's what this finding means. High beta-glucuronidase means toxins are getting trapped in your body. So you have this high toxic burden of heavy metals and who knows what else, but he can't get rid of it because this beta-glucuronidase is blocking that from happening. I know that's a little more technical, but I hope that makes sense. He also had signs of bacterial dysbiosis on his organic acid test. Okay, this is a urine test, and this hippuric acid elevation here is a strong indicator for bacterial overgrowth and dysbiosis. So we see here, we're gathering all these clues to see why his thyroid is not working properly. Pattern number 2, moving along, the stress pattern. This one is interesting because like the first pattern, you're likely to see the thyroid hormones low, but the anomaly here is that the TSH is also low. With TSH being low, you would think that they're hyperthyroid, but the hormones are suggesting otherwise. So again, you're seeing the importance of needing to see all of the clues. Now, why would thyroid hormone be low and TSH be low? It's not common. It's not super common. Not as common as the first pattern. So I wrote here that TSH should rise to stimulate the thyroid, but cortisol, when under chronic stress, it suppresses thyrotropin releasing hormone, TRH, and TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, from the top down, from the hypothalamus and the pituitary down. This is the body intentionally downshifting the metabolism under stress. It's a preservation state, okay? So the main sort of takeaway here again is cortisol, our primary stress hormone, can suppress TSH levels. In this case, TSH is more how we actually feel. So what causes this? HPA axis dysregulation. There's, I think, multiple modules on that in the FDN course. It's kind of a fancy way for saying chronic stress. That can also include trauma, overtraining, high cortisol, even steroid use like prednisone, for example. That can actually have an effect on this whole HPA axis system. So cortisol, let's take a look at the next image here. We're seeing cortisol here in this kind of pink rectangle, and we're seeing this red arrow over here to TSH. And what that's showing us here is that cortisol can inhibit TSH. It can also inhibit the conversion of T4 into T3. It's almost as though when we're under stress, our body's trying to force us to slow down, to hibernate, if you will, and to preserve resources and to focus on healing and repair before the thyroid kicks back into gear, before the engine starts to rev up again. So this is also another version of the stress pattern. It looks a little bit different. So same pattern, different client. This client has had years of chronic stress and trauma, fatigue, blood sugar imbalances. She was leaning a little bit more pre-diabetic, constipation, and low ferritin, which is your iron storage. She was not taking any thyroid support or prescriptions at the time. I mention that because when I see low TSH, the first thing I might consider or try to rule out is this individual maybe taking or kind of over medicating with thyroid hormone, or maybe even an over-the-counter glandular, and they're taking too much and that's suppressing their TSH. I always want to check that first and rule that out. But that was 100% not the case here. I think this was a stress response. Remember the previous slide, cortisol is suppressing or blunting TSH, trying to slow the body down. So this can come from chronic stress, all the same causes actually as the first pattern. So we don't need to read that read through that again. But one thing that's unique here is that she had very high reverse T3, which means, remember, reverse T3 is the brake pedal. She's pushing on the brake pretty hard, even though her thyroid hormone levels look actually pretty good. But she's still going to feel functionally hypothyroid because the brake pedal is high. We're pushing down the brake. So you're still going to feel that fatigue and the constipation, which is everything in your body slowing down, right? So this is not a matter of, it's not that she's letting off the gas pedal, she's pushing on the brake pedal too hard. And we saw that image where free T4 can go down either pathway. And we saw that chronic stress can increase reverse T3. Your body's trying to slow you down. Another clinical pearl, if TSH is low, also not only check to see if they're medicating with thyroid hormone, but also check to see if they're supplementing with biotin. This is totally random, but believe it or not, biotin supplementation can artificially push TSH levels down and make it look like you're hyperthyroid when you're not. So if you're supplementing with biotin, it's not a problem, but you do want to get off of it, I would say, for at least 72 hours before you run a thyroid panel. Pattern number 3 is the liver stress pattern. This is where your thyroid's making enough thyroid hormone, the T4, so your thyroid's working fine, but it's getting bottlenecked in the liver. So this client, primary symptoms were cold hands and feet, worry often, so anxiety, and acne. With this pattern, we saw relatively normal TSH. It's ever so slightly high. I wouldn't nitpick really at a 2.22. T4 was normal, but reverse T3 is quite low. I consider 2.35 to be pretty low. It's not, I'm not going to say it's the lowest I've ever seen, but low enough where you would absolutely experience hypothyroidism. So the root cause here is actually impaired conversion of T4 to T3. And this can either be due to liver congestion, especially sluggish phase 2 detox. It can also be due to nutrient deficiencies, but we'll come back to that. So we haven't discussed this yet. So for those of you who are new, we said that before your body and your cells can take in that thyroid hormone, it first has to get converted from T4 to T3. That conversion primarily happens in the liver, to some extent the kidney, and to some in other peripheral tissues, but it primarily happens in the liver. So if your liver is sluggish or congested due to toxin exposure or poor diet, then you're going to have poor conversion of T4 to T3, that's exactly what we're seeing here. We're seeing the T4 levels are optimal at the bottom of that optimal range, but the T3 levels are what's low. Okay. So it's like shipping out the raw materials, the T4, but the factory, like the liver, can't finish the end product, which is that T3 is what you're actually using. Now, we also need certain nutrients to convert T4 to T3, especially selenium. So this might be a sign of selenium deficiency, which selenium we get primarily from Brazil nuts and salmon. Those would be the primary dietary sources. You can also supplement with selenium too, if needed. All right, so these deiodinase enzymes, these are the enzymes that actually cause that conversion or allow this to happen. So that conversion of T4 to T3 occurs primarily with the help of deiodinase 1. And what this enzyme does is it removes one iodine molecule. So where this actually comes into play, this is interesting. The thyroid hormone T4 is the amino acid tyrosine plus 4 iodine molecules. That's actually, those are the ingredients needed to make T4. And then deiodinase, it removes one iodine molecule and we get T3. It's that simple, right? Now, this enzyme primarily exists in the liver, to also a fairly high degree in the kidney, to a lesser extent in the thyroid. So most of this conversion happens in the liver and kidneys, right? So D1's primary role deiodinase 1 is to maintain healthy, normal T3 levels. This is really key. I didn't want to just nerd out on this for the sake of just sharing with you something super nerdy, but deiodinases are selenoproteins, meaning that selenium is embedded directly in the enzyme structure. So you don't get T4 to T3 conversion without selenium, like period, full stop. So this same client, just to go back really quickly, she had this is the thyroid conversion issue. It's a liver stress pattern, we're calling it. So on her HTMA, this hair tissue mineral analysis, she had extremely high levels, like off the charts, maybe one of the highest levels I've ever seen of uranium and very high levels of arsenic. Okay, so is that going to stress the liver? Absolutely, it's going to stress the liver, right? And that might be why we just started working together, so time will tell, but that may be why she has low free T3 levels, because there's poor conversion. Now, I use the same pattern here to actually illustrate that we can also see a similar pattern when someone is taking the medication Synthroid. So Synthroid is a synthetic form of thyroid hormone. And the thing to really highlight here is it's a T4 only medication. There's no T3 in Synthroid. So I put this quote here: I'm taking Synthroid and I still feel like poop. Everyone that's ever taken Synthroid. That's not always entirely true. That was definitely my experience, though. When I first was diagnosed, I was put on Synthroid. I had what I call a honeymoon period, maybe for 3 to 6 months, where I felt really great. And then all of my symptoms came back, right? So why does this happen? Well, remember, this is T4 only. Many people don't respond well to Synthroid, especially when there's an issue converting T4 and a T3. Like, let's say they have liver problems, liver congestion. They might not end up taking that T4 and converting it to T3. And so they're still effectively functionally hypothyroid. So this can result in this is very common. I've seen this many times with people taking either generic levothyroxine or medicating with Synthroid. We see normal T4 and low T3, and they're coming to me because they still have these hypothyroid symptoms. So years and decades of reported patient experiences and observation tells us that the risk of problems is far too high with T4 only, sooner or later for too many. This is from the website Stop the Thyroid Madness, and it was actually one of the first websites that I started reading up on the thyroid when I was first diagnosed. Okay. Hopefully that makes good sense. We have the nutrient deficiency pattern. And Evan, if I'm kind of running low on time here, I'm happy to kind of skip forward. I do see we're over the hour.
Yeah, we're over the hour. We had messaged Courtney because, for those who don't know, I don't know why they would know this, Courtney's on staff, so it's kind of easy enough to just give everyone extra time. But I would say, if it's, I don't know, what slide are you on? Do you know what number this is?
I'd have to exit I think we're like 80%.
Okay. I would say we would probably want to be done by like 3:15 at the latest, so like another like 8 minutes. Is that okay? All right, thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, totally fine. Okay, cool. So yeah, just wanted to sense, and I don't want to step on anyone else's toes either. So we've got the nutrient deficiency pattern. This one's interesting because TSH is normal, but the thyroid hormones are still low. TSH is normal, thyroid hormones are still low. So typically with a hypothyroid pattern, you see high TSH, right? That's like the most common typical hypothyroid pattern. So in this case, what actually might be going on is that there are not enough building blocks or nutrients to make the thyroid hormone. We talked about iodine being a building block for thyroid hormone. We need the amino acid tyrosine. We need iron. We need heme iron. The enzyme thyroid peroxidase, or TPO, which actually makes our thyroid hormone from thyroglobulin, is iron dependent, right? Now, this was interesting. I forgot to include it on the slide, but this client was deficient in iron that did come up on our blood work. Like, it could have been as simple as an iron deficiency, or maybe at the gut level, not breaking down and digesting and absorbing that iron. Selenium, zinc, B vitamins, we've talked a great deal about some of these. So this is sort of like trying to bake a cake without the ingredients. This is a bit more in the weeds down here. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to move forward. This is a far less common scenario. As interesting as it is, it's just not very common. Okay, so clinical Pearl, we can actually run, if we're suspecting iodine deficiency, we can run a marker called thyroglobulin, not to be confused with thyroglobulin antibodies. This is a totally different marker. It's not something I always include in a standard thyroid panel, but it is something we can run. So this actually behaves a lot like TSH. So just as TSH rises when thyroid hormone is low, thyroglobulin levels can rise when iodine is deficient. So they're inversely proportional. So the higher your thyroglobulin, like I'm showing down here, especially if it's over 30 nanograms per milliliter, that can signal significant iodine deficiency or thyroid dysfunction. This is also getting quite into the weeds here, but what it does show is that thyroid peroxidase, what we're looking at here is the production of thyroid hormone. And it's the enzyme thyroid peroxidase that uses both thyroglobulin as it's sort of like a pre-hormone. It's like the building block for thyroid hormone, plus iodide. And then thyroid peroxidase puts that all together for you to make thyroid hormone. But from a nutritional perspective, what's important, like I had mentioned a moment ago, that TPO, it needs iron. You need iron to activate thyroid peroxidase to build you to make that thyroid hormone. So the cell danger response pattern is, I think, one of the most fascinating patterns. This is where everything on the panel actually looks normal. But you're looking at a situation where all of these hypothyroid symptoms are still present: fatigue, brain fog, weight gain, cold intolerance, depression, dry skin, right? This is a situation where the body shifts into a protect and survive state. And this can be caused by chronic infections like mold, Lyme, Epstein-Barr parasites, mitochondrial dysfunction, emotional trauma, autonomic nervous system dysregulation, and so on, right? It's a situation where the thyroid hormone's knocking on the door, but the door of the cell is locked and it's not allowing the thyroid hormone in, okay? So even when everything looks normal, I am still not going to dismiss or gaslight this client. It very likely might be that there's deeper seated issues, whether it's infections, toxin exposure, or maybe a pattern of nervous system dysregulation. This is the cell danger response here outlined by Dr. Robert Navio. He says the cell danger response is the evolutionarily conserved metabolic response that protects cells hosts from harm. When the CDR persists abnormally, the whole body metabolism and gut microbiome are disturbed. The cell danger response is a universal response to environmental threat or injury. So these two papers are highly worth. It's really, really fascinating to learn about how this works. Okay, I'm going to move quickly because I know we only have a few minutes here. The kind of main takeaway is if you're suspecting this sort of cell danger response, even that aside, if we're really trying to heal the thyroid holistically, we need to run more than just a thyroid test, right? Especially if we're suspecting there's an issue with the cells taking in and receiving thyroid hormone, right? Well, then there's some other deeper seated issues going on there beyond what just a thyroid panel can show us. This was a client with fairly normal thyroid levels on a thyroid hormone panel, but had very high calcium levels on her HTMA, which we call a calcium shell in the HTMA world. This represents calcium building up in the wrong places, like calcium not getting into the bone where it should be. And That calcium kind of building up around the cells can form what we might think of as a shell and inhibit thyroid hormone from getting in. Dr. Navio here, this is interesting. When danger is detected, mitochondria alter cellular metabolism to help shield the cell from further injury. This is accomplished by stiffening cell membranes, activating the production of reactive oxygen species. So in my view, in this, I'm not speaking from Dr. Navio's experience. I'm just connecting my own dots. I think these both represent the same idea. This stiffening of the cell membranes seen with the cell danger response and the calcium shell on the HTMA, this calcium building up excessively, where many view this calcium shell as a protective response to emotional distress or trauma. Okay. What we'll do here is, out of respect for everyone's time, I skipped that last pattern. Just want to take everyone out here. This is where to find me. I go by the Mindful Nutrivore at themindfulnutrivore.com. I do offer one-on-one thyroid transformation coaching where we run all of these labs. We look at all the data points and we leave no stone unturned. Feel free to take a screenshot of this slide here. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, feel free to email me at ryan@themindfulnutrivore.com. And announcing a really exciting new development here. For the first time, I'm publicly promoting here this functional fast track. So this is a one-on-one mentorship to master advanced testing, grow your client base, and become the go-to expert in your niche or field. So this is essentially a private one-on-one deep dive mentorship where you'll have the benefit of my 10 years worth of insight in roughly a 6-month period, where you get insights into my workflow, my business practices. I offer thorough case reviews and audits of your client lab results and protocols. And if anyone wants to check this out, you could scan that QR code. This is the first time that I'm announcing this today at this presentation. I am super excited about this. In a sense, this is 10 years in the making, and it's a brand new offering. And for anyone that's looking for that deep personal one-on-one support to accelerate their mastery and clinical excellence, definitely check this out. There's an application. Spots are limited. As I am only one human, I can only work with so many people at any given time, but feel free to fill out the application. We could schedule a call and talk about it more.
Awesome, Ryan. We're going to leave that up too. And do we have a direct link for people people do use the QR code, but just a direct link for them in the comments would be great too. What should I tell them to type in?
Yeah, it's functionalfasttrack.coach. .coach, yeah.
Gotcha.
.com will take you somewhere else.
So I got that on for you guys. I'm sorry. I know that we're going over today. We haven't really done this. This happened in the morning too. I guess it's just day 5 fun. And Courtney, just so you know, we're going to have time for you as well. We're having time for all the speakers. I told Reed even, I'm like, give yourself an extra 15 minutes, boss, because we want to make sure we get all these amazing speakers in for this last day. All right. So everyone, please give a huge thank you to Ryan. Do you think you can rapid fire like 3 or 4 questions with me just so we can leave this up?
Of course. Oh, yeah. More than happy. I could stay as long as you want. I was just trying to be respectful.
It's all good. I just want to make sure we get some questions, but we will be moving on in just a second. Guys, I cannot recommend enough. Follow Ryan on Instagram as well. He answers there at The Mindful Nutrivore. That's at The Mindful Nutrivore on Instagram. And this functional fast track thing for me, if you are someone that is like truly looking to dive into the clinical side, the amount of time and actually, quite frankly, money you would save yourself by getting 6 months with Ryan versus what you've done over 10 years, like you said. And let's just be real. I know you're too humble to say this, so I'll say it for you. There is a difference between 10 years with someone who learns the way that you've learned. I've watched you study stuff before. Maybe than someone a little bit more average, like myself, right? So if you're going on 1.5 or 2x compared to the average person, for some of us, this might take 15 to 20 years to get what you've gotten. If you had to estimate, I'm just being, let's go super conservative with this. Between the consults that you've done, because I do consider that educational, I think that you're studying people in a sense, the labs that you've done, courses, podcasts, books, how many hours do you actually think you've spent in this last 10 years learning about functional healthcare and medicine?
I don't even know how to answer that. I mean, truly, like I'm a book nerd and I'm a podcast addict I've taken more courses than I can count. I've attended more conferences than I can count. Already a few this year, one in Austin, one in Miami, where we got to hang out. I mean, thousands and thousands of hours.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't I don't know the exact
What was the
answer.
Hashimoto's thing you mentioned earlier? I apologize. Sometimes either I'm typing stuff or I had to step away, so I didn't hear. What was the one that you were talking about? The Hashimoto's presentation or something?
Yeah, so I want to say this was October or November, and I did a presentation on Hashimoto's and autoimmunity.
Before FDN, you mean?
And
okay.
Yes.
All right. I have that for you guys somewhere. I'll get that figured out. That's not in the immediate moment, but thank you. I know what you're talking about now. All right, let's buff out a few more. I see Jennifer Hill Jones in the chat. Hey, Jennifer. Okay. Let's see what we can do here. We're going to just buff out a few, and then we're going to go to Courtney. Guys, doesn't a percentage of conversion also occur in the gut? I think that they were talking about. This is towards the end.
Yeah, it's pretty minimal. It's almost negligible. I think it's 10%, maybe at most like 15%.
Okay.
So yeah, it's true, but it's not the first place I'd look when there's a conversion issue.
All right, Deanna, I've been told that on the HTMA that the toxic elements rarely show up on a first test. Is that true?
Yeah.
And are there examples from first or repeated HTMA tests? Well, I don't know if we can get into the examples today, but let's focus on the question.
Yeah, so the answer is 100% yes, especially if you have a slow metabolism to begin with, what we call a slow metabolic type on the HTMA. You're lacking the essential minerals you need for cellular detox. So as a result, the heavy metals are likely to show up very low, if not at all, on the first HTMA if you have a slow metabolism. The important thing, though, is that doesn't mean they're not there. It just means you don't have like enough juice to be dumping these heavy metals and allowing them to show up on the test. That also emphasizes why retesting is so important.
Awesome. All right. I had one more here we had to get to before we hop off. Marianne, what shows high iodine levels in the tissues?
There's a number of ways to test for iodine. You can test that thyroglobulin marker. Remember, it's inversely related to iodine. So if thyroglobulin levels are low, that could mean iodine is high. You can also do what's called iodine loading testing. That's where you take an iodine tablet and then you collect all of your urine over a 24-hour period. And the lower that number, the lower your iodine levels are. So it's a urine collection test. That's one that I often run in my practice for assessing iodine levels. It probably is a little more scientific than the thyroglobulin method that I mentioned on the slide. And there are other methods too, but that just kind of gives you a quick high-level overview.
Okay. All right, guys, just for the sake of time, we do have to cut this here, but I think you guys would rather, if you could only choose one, I'm sure you'd rather get the presentations than full-out Q&A. And Ryan's on a lot of our events, so make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel below. I'm thinking about this. You probably have 4 or 5 hours minimum of content just on our YouTube channel. So we really appreciate you coming on today, guys. Remember, get that QR code. Last chance to get this. I will also put the link in the chat one more time because it's functionalfasttrack.coach, not .com, but .coach. And if you're, again, looking to upgrade your clinical side, I cannot really recommend this enough. So FDN practitioners out there that are looking to go from, hey, I'm an FDN to, hey, I'm someone that is widely respected in the AFDNP group. I'm being reached out to by other practitioners for complicated cases. Ryan's the guy. So, dude, super glad to have you. Super glad to be able to work with you and start our new project together as well. And I hope that some people take advantage of this functional fast track because Ryan is like the least salesy person you'll ever met. So when he says limited spots, he literally means that, right? He's got like 3 other things going on. So there's probably only a handful of people that can actually do that right now.
Yeah. Well, as always, Evan, you're my number one hype man. I really appreciate it. I see a lot of kind words, and I wish I had time to respond to everyone. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this and putting all this together for everybody. So thanks for having me, and hope to be back soon.
All right, I will take